Thanks for joining us today on a special episode of the Jesus Famous podcast with Pastor Nate Holdridge. Today we have a special guest in the studio sharing their story about how Jesus has changed their life. Join us as we discuss stories and discover how Jesus is famous in the testimonies of those around us.
All right, Tommy Cota. Dude, I got a question for you.
What's up?
Is this the year that you finally start working out?
This is good. This is it. Yeah, I made it up in my mind, so I'm hoping maybe I'll start soon.
No, just play with you, man. You look good. I did want to ask you a question, a good warm-up question. If I knew you in the 90s, I can't even imagine knowing you in the 90s. You know, just you
I don't know. I'm trying to think.
Telling your story.
It depends on what kind of life you were living in the 90s.
I was just living the whitest little Pacific Grove, California teenage kid life you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, probably not.
But if I knew you in the 90s,
and
if I had the courage to ask you at that stage what one of your favorite bands was, what would you have said?
All right. Man, it probably would have been, this would probably be a trip to you, but as far as I've always loved a bunch of different genres, but I would say in the 90s, it would have to be probably anything that would be produced from Death Row Records.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So anything from there to oldies, like, you know, just a bunch of old classic, you know, East LA kind of oldies. And then also I listened to a lot of rock and roll, which I still do today, but even at that time, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I'll say as far as a band goes, man, I love Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, that would have been my three things you could have found me listening to.
Eclectic.
You know?
I kind of got that vibe last night when we were hanging out at dinner and you were talking about your youngest daughter and how creative she is and everything. But you were like vibing off it. I could tell like you understood the way she is with movies and all that. You're that kind of guy?
Yeah, I think so. And it's a trip too because we talk and she's like, Dad, you like, she'll say like, you like a lot of different things. Like, you know what, growing up, I told her I liked a lot of different kinds of music. You know, it wasn't just one genre. It was, you know, from blues to rock and roll, oldies and gangster rap and R&B. You know, and I was telling her, it was funny. I said, you know, I was kind of like, man, I was like able to be a chameleon, you know, just kind of blend into whatever environment, you know. And I said, that was probably one of my problems too back in the day that got me into a lot of trouble, you know. But when it comes to like music and arts and all that stuff, I always had an appreciation, you know, I think. But again, just going back to the 90s, if you were to ask me anything from Death Row Records, you know, some oldies, you know, or some old funk, and some classic rock and roll.
So how do you listen to your music now? What do you use? Spotify? Do you do, you know, what do you do?
Spotify, and I just got, and this is the only reason why I use Apple Music. I just got like, I think 6 months free.
Okay.
So I said, I'll take the 6 months free.
A man on a budget.
That's
Postpone the Spotify.
Okay. That's exactly what I did.
Were you on the Spotify free or were you subscribing to it?
I did the Spotify 6 months free thing.
Yeah.
And then my daughter, she's got Spotify. So she's like, Dad, you can link up to mine. So I'm able to link up to hers. But prior to that, I was on the Spotify free. So every 2 songs, I was getting like 2 minutes of commercials. I'd have to go and just press mute, you know. It's like, okay, this commercial's almost done, you know. Man on a budget, bro, you know.
Well, hey, enjoy the next 6 months, man.
I am. Apple Music, that's it.
So, you know, you were with our church this last weekend preaching, first Sunday of the year for those of you who are listening to the podcast today. And it was our missions Sunday, so you're kind of setting the tone for us. And I love the passage God put on your heart, you know, Mark 5, 1-20, the demoniac and the Gadarenes and Jesus going to the other side. And I love the phrase that you coined, the other siders. You know, we got to reach the other siders. And what do we do to reach the other siders? And letting ourselves be uncomfortable and not expecting that it's going to be easy and all that stuff. It was just such a great tone to set for the year. and you shared your story a lot, during the message. But, of course, you got a 40-minute slot to preach the word. You can't just elongate the telling of your story. But then we went out to dinner that night, and you were sharing a little bit more of the details of how you came to Christ. And you were telling the story about how, I think you said you were about 29 years old and you were in jail again.
Again.
And you were trying to get out. Somehow you're trying to get out. Not like you weren't trying to dig a tunnel or anything, but you were.
No, that's Chapo Guzman. He digs tunnels. But not.
You weren't at that level?
I wasn't at that level, right. Man. Yeah.
So tell me what happened. Walk me through that, because I just loved hearing how God interjected himself into just a hand. It felt, I'm sure from your end, like he finally, in a 2-day window, God showed up, but really, it was just, that was the exclamation point.
It came to that. There was a lot of circumstances that led up to that. And, when it's interesting when we all look back, you can kind of see how the Lord did this and did that and adjusted this in your life to bring you to a certain place. And, and so, when I was first started going in and out of prison and in and out of jail, every time I would go into jail, from the very first time I was incarcerated, I would come out worse. And it's just my mental conditioning, even in a short amount of time, in the time when I first went to jail, which was only like maybe a week or something, it just conditioned my mind like, okay, I can do this. I'm not going to lie. The very first time I did go to jail, that first night, man, I was scared. I was 20 years old. I had just turned 20 years old. I was afraid. I was, scared. I cried. I was like, oh man, get me out of here. I don't want to be here, but I survived like that first 24 hours and a couple of days after that. And then when I got released, I was like, oh, okay, I guess I can do this kind of life. And so the reason why I shared that is because there was a span. I was going in and out of the LA County Jail, and then eventually doing prison time, and from a 3-year sentence and a few violations and another case I caught, but every time I would come out, I would just, this mental condition of like, oh, I can live this life and be like more gangster, that was just like more with one of the homies, and that was what I saw there, and I gravitated towards that. And also the drug use and everything that was involved with it, and the pride, and just the way you carried yourself. I kind of I enjoyed that. I thought I did, and it came to a point. I paroled in 2000 from the last prison sentence that I had.
Okay.
And then so upon my release, I went right back to that same kind of life. Prior to that, though, I gotta share this, because prior to that, when I was in prison in 1996, is when my wife Diana, she made a full commitment to follow Jesus. She just all in following Jesus. She would come and visit me in prison, just talking about the Bible. And I'm like, I'm like, I have no clue what you're saying right now. Like, who are you? And I would listen, but I was like, okay, you're going to put money on my books or what? That's all I was concerned about, I think. But so for about 4 years, she was going to this church, and she was faithfully praying, believing, and just trusting the Lord. And she had faithful women that were pouring into her, just encouraging her. So when I got released, I get released to like now to my, I'm there with my wife, who's on fire for the Lord, trusting Jesus, going to Bible study. I thought she was going to see some dudes, man. Because she was always at church, like at least minimum 2 to 3 times a week, and
you're like, there's got to be another reason.
She was going to visit some dude. Well, she was visiting Jesus. That's what she was doing. But in my mind, I was like, what's going on here? But so she was faithfully praying. And so in the midst of, from January until I think it was May, okay, so 5 months, I'm living this life and I'm doing all this, but these emotions in me were kind of just like, it was a turmoil that I was going because of the things that had happened to me in my past, from my childhood and just growing up, and also just looking at myself in the mirror. This is something I didn't share, even at dinner I didn't share this, but I remember there was one day I was looking at myself in the mirror and just with disgust. I didn't like the person I was. I was empty. I had nothing to offer my family, my wife. I had no skill. Like what am I doing here? And I just kind of basically gave up, he just gave up on my life. And I was hopeless, man. I had no hope. I gave up on my life. And I didn't really care what had happened to me. People that were in the circles that I was hanging out with and doing, things with on the streets or whatever. Some of them were, a couple of them were murdered. One of them went to prison for murder. And so I'm just, and these are like some tight circles that I was around, and this is the chaos that's happening. And so on top of that emotional feeling that I had of hopelessness, this is, my environment that I'm around. I'm like tripping out. And so now the cops are after me, and it's just like, and that was the thing. I was like, man, I'm 29. At the time I was like, man, I'm old. I'm going to be 30. Man, if I wish I could be 30 again. Right. But, in my mind, I'm like, man, I want to be 30 years old. I have nothing to show for my life, really, And so, so that was in May. And shortly thereafter that moment, a few days later, is when my house got raided. It was a parole raid. And my parole agent and the LA County Sheriff raided the house I was living at. And I was there. So they handcuffed me. Off to jail I go. My parole agent is like, and I'm in the back seat of this car, telling my parole agent, man, I'm done. I don't want to, I want to change my life now. I'm just done with this. I don't want to go to jail. I'm tired of it. Like, I'm tired of jail. I really literally was tired of that life, of the homies and how everything, I was just tired of it. I just was beginning to see like there's nothing in
because
this.
Up to that point, you didn't have that kind of feeling when you'd get locked up. You didn't have that feeling of, I'm over this. It was just another step, another stage, another...
Exactly.
Wow.
Up until that point, you're exactly right, man. I was like, all right, let's go to prison then. I got the homies there. We can do this and that. I will just spend like 8 hours a day just working out on the yard and, just hanging out, doing nothing. But now I'm at a place where I was tired of that. I just was, I was just done. But I didn't know how to get out of this life, this bondage of addiction really was what kept me in this place of just hopelessness and loss. And so I'm telling my parole agent as we're getting ready to leave, I want to change my life. And he just told me at that point, he said, man, shut up. Now you want to change your life. Now you got the handcuffs on. Now you want to change. Shut up, sit back. You're going to prison. For I already told you 12 months violation. That's the minimum. Minimum you're going to get. And so so I sit back. I'm like, all right. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to Chino State Prison for a violation for at least 12 months. And I was like, man, and now I was getting upset, just, man, I hate this, and so go through this process again, and I had only been out for like 5 months, from doing, 3+ years, almost 4 years straight. And so anyways, I get to the LA County jail, and I remember some of the guys, and some of them were young. They were coming up to the bars, and they're in the module that I was at. Like, hey man, they're kind of just saying, hey, we're happy to see you. What's going on, man? You're here, you're back. Just almost happy to see me. And I just I remember I stopped. I'm like, shut up, fool. I'm in jail. Why are you happy to see me? I'm in jail. And
this is not an accomplishment.
Yes, this is not something to be happy about. See, but the module and the environment that I put myself in for so many years didn't think that way.
Right.
We thought, all right, we're here to get our stripes. We're here to earn those stripes, and so now no one really thought that way. And so I'm starting to think this way, but I still didn't know how to get out. And so a couple days goes by, and my parole agent, actually it was only maybe 1 day goes by, my parole agent shows up at the LA County jail, calls me out, and I'm thinking he's just going to send me to Chino right then and there, but he has a visit with me because my wife called him, and my wife is asked him if he would give me an option of doing a men's program, an addiction, men's drug and alcohol program, rather than going into prison. And he was trying to talk her out of that. Like, he's never going to change. He needs to go to prison. Why do you love him? And it's already been 10 years that we've been married at that time, and you need to leave him. He's never going to change. But she was saying the same thing to him that she said to some of my family members, that, hey, she's like, I believe in God, and I believe God has a plan, and I'm praying for him. And so,
which is just amazing to me, that level of faith. I mean, she was in high school when you guys got married. Yeah. So she's not this older, matured person when she gets married to you. She's very young.
Yeah.
She gets saved, but she's still young at that time.
Yeah.
But the level of trust.
Yeah, young in the faith. And it's just, that was it. And it was just raw faith. As you bring that up right now, it's just raw faith. She's just like, I'm going to call. So he came and asked me what I thought. And I said, okay. I said, oh yeah, let me do the men's program. See, because prior to that, a couple days prior to that, I was just like, I was done, but I didn't know I didn't want this life. And so I'm starting to think, when I have this option, oh yeah, I can go to NA and AA and just smoke weed. And, because in my mental thought, like, weed is not a drug, so I can just smoke weed, kick back with the homies all day, buy a lowrider, and just watch the kids play around in the neighborhood, and so I said, yes, I'll do this. And so he had told me, okay, for me to continue on parole, he says, I'm going to COP you, okay, which is continue on parole.
Okay.
And, but there's a process of paperwork that's got to go through. And he said, it's going to take about 3 to 5 days. So I'm in the jail. I was like, all right, 3 to 5 days. All right. So I'm getting out of this place. I'm just like, I'm not saying anything to none of the homies. Like, I'm trying to just like, hey, I'm not even here, man. I'm just going to sleep and rest, and they're going to call my name to get released. 5 days comes and goes, 10 days comes and goes. It was about 23 days later that I'm in this cell, and within that 23-day span, because of some of the things that I was doing prior to the, me being in jail for so long and prison life, there was things that I did, and people that I did know from other neighborhoods and all that other stuff knew that I was there, during this time. And so they're like, hey man, what's up, homie? It's like, that's how we used to talk to each other, like, what's up, homie? It's like, hey, I got this, got this problem, got this issue, and help me out. We're here, so we would always like, send little notes back and forth to each other. And like, if, and even violent actions would take place within the LA County jail, and sadly to say, to my shame, and God's forgiven me, but I was a part of some of those things in times past. And so there was an issue that was going on, and I had gotten this note, we call it a kite, or a huila, and asking if I would kind of behave in the way that I did in the past and do some things to this youngster that was in my cell, because he had crossed some kind of line with some other dude, and so in my mind, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to do this. And so I'm thinking, okay, maybe they just need to see him with a fat lip or a black eye, we would call it, hey, this youngster has to get regulated. That was one of the terms. Okay. Hey, we're going to regulate you right now. Yeah. So just stand there, let me give you a fat lip, maybe knock out your tooth, or something, just so everyone can see you got regulated, But it was more than just like a fat lip or a black eye. I was actually asked to cut this person with a jailhouse made knife which is called like a jailhouse shank. Mm-hmm. And so at this point, again, I'm thinking, man, I'm supposed to be out of here. 3 to 5 days, my parole agent said, and I'm still here, and this is what's going on. And so I got all this, I'm tripping, like I'm upset, I'm mad, I don't want to be here no more, and something bad's going to happen. And so I remember on that particular day, I started, we had phones. We had phones in the cells. And so I started calling my parole agent. I called his office, left a couple of messages. He's not answering, or, he can't call me back. I'm in there. But he's not answering his phone. I called my wife to see if I can get her to call three-way to another office to try to connect with him. And she wasn't answering her phone. And my mom answered. So I called my mom. She finally answered. And so I'm like, Mom, I go, without saying too much over the phone of what was going on, I was just like, Mom, listen, I go, some bad things are happening right now. I need to talk to my parole agent. So you do me this favor, call three-way. to my parole agent. And my mom, she was like, no, I'm not calling anybody for you, because I would always exploit my mom and her kindness, and get her to call three-way to different people. And she would get mad. Why'd you let me call that person? And I'm, get her involved in some of the stuff that I was doing. And so she just didn't trust me. I don't blame her at that time. But she had told me that I'm not going to call nobody for you. The only person that can get you out of the jail you're in is Jesus. You need to call Jesus. And that's what she told me, man. And I remember I was on the phone. I was like, I got mad. I cussed, I said some bad words to her, cussed her out, and I hung up the phone, And then I sit there for like 10 minutes and I would realize, like, oh, shoot, man, she was the only one that answered the phone. I better call her back, Mom, I'm sorry, please, But now the phones, they're not working because they're operated by the deputies, in the main area of that jail. So they turned all the phones off. And now it's about maybe 8 o'clock at night. I have this jailhouse shank. There's this young person that I've been asked to regulate, in a way. Now there's a shank involved, and I was just like, man, I don't want to do this. And if I don't, I started feeling like, man, this is like kind of like a setup, like I'm doing someone else's dirty work for them, and I shouldn't be doing this because that's kind of like against our own jailhouse regulations, But what if it is, like, this is something that is being requested of me, and oh man, like, I just found myself in a bad place, and I didn't want any part of that life no more, but I didn't know, if, I was hopeless. I was just hopeless. And so the only words that were echoing through my ears, man, were the words of my mom at that time. When she says, the only person who can get you out of there is Jesus. You got to call to Jesus. And so I remember I sat down at the foot of my rack, at my bunk right there, and the bars were right here on my right side. And I was just like, in my mind, I said this. I was like, God, I don't know, if you're real, you got to get me out of here, because you know what's happening. You know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I don't think anything's going to happen good. And I got to get out of here, But I don't know. If you're real, you'll do it. If not, I guess, I don't know what's happening, man.
Because the clock was ticking, because you couldn't do this to your cellmate in the cell, because then they'd know that it was you. You were waiting for something the next day.
Yeah, exactly. So normally what would take place is like we would, like stuff like this when it would happen, it'd be all planned and everything. And when every other day they would open up one tier to go out and do showers, right? And so the next day was our turn to do showers. And showers started after breakfast, which was like at 8 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And so they would open all the gates, everyone would come out, and we would take lines, take turns in taking a shower real quick. And so that's usually when violent things had taken place. Okay.
So that clock is ticking. You know that moment is coming.
Yep. Tomorrow's showers, tomorrow's 8 o'clock, it's going to happen, something's going to happen. And so, I laid down, right after I thought that thought and, prayed that prayer, really, in my mind. I laid down, I fell asleep. And next thing I know, about 4 a.m, my name gets called over the loudspeaker that they have in there. And a deputy comes down and just knocks on the bars and calls my name and says, hey, man, your paperwork's here for your parole agent. You're getting out of here right now. And I was like, right now? He said, yeah, right now. So I got up, man, and I told my cellie, this young guy who was, in the crosshairs of someone, right? I just told him, hey man, when you wake up in the morning, just tell everyone that I was gone. You don't know what happened to me, man. That I was just gone, So he's like, all right, man, because he was gonna make an announcement. I thought, hey, the homie's leaving. I said, no, don't say nothing, man. Just say that I'm gone, And so I called my wife that first thing in that morning to come and get me, and she came to pick me up, and I was telling her what had taken place, like, hey, last night this was going on, this was happening, and man, this, like, I was like, God, if you're real, I don't know if you're real, but if you are, you got to get me out of here. And I was telling you, babe, it worked, I prayed and it worked, for the first time, and so she was like listening to the story I was telling her, and then she turns to me. I remember she'd been going to church faithfully for about 4 years up until this point, and there was a Friday night women's prayer that she would always go to, and she said that, she starts telling me that, oh man, I was at this prayer meeting last night with all the women, and all we did was pray that God would make himself real to you. And I'm like, so I'm sitting in the passenger seat. She's telling me this. I'm like freaking out. Like, what? Like, that's real. Like, so I'm like, this is real. This is real happening. This happened. This is real stuff. I'm not saved yet. And so I'm like tripping out, like, man, for the first time, God answered, a prayer like this, because I would get arrested a lot, man. And I would always be asking, oh, Lord, I'd be like on the hot hood, like, Lord, please don't let them take me to jail. They always took me to jail, so I figured, man, these prayers don't work or something. But so I'm thinking in my head, finally this worked, and so
it was those ladies. It was their prayer.
It was, man. And it was the faithfulness, of just all these years, about 4 years prior, of just my wife praying and other family members and my wife getting the women praying. And so I get home and the next thing you know is like, when we get home that Saturday morning, my brother-in-law and some of my homeboys were there in the garage, they were getting high and drinking and stuff. And so my wife goes in. She was 5 months pregnant because, about 4.5, 5 months pregnant with our youngest daughter at this time. And so my wife goes into the house and I go in the garage, and the first thing I do, man, I start drinking, start getting high. My homies are there. We're like scheming already, how we can go pick up some money. And because I'm thinking, hey, I only got all day Saturday, Sunday, because I'm going to this program on Monday. So I got like less than 48 hours to make some stuff happen. And so we're there scheming, and my wife comes in and she was like, what are you doing? Like, I thought you said you wanted to stop. You're going to the program. And I was like, I am, that's on Monday though, And so I knew she was a little upset, just because of the things that I was doing and what I had said prior and the experience that I had the night before, God doing something. And so she was upset. And so she got a hotel room. She's like, I got to get you out of this, our neighborhood here. So she rented a hotel room in Orange County, California. And so we go to this hotel room, NBC Suites, and I'm up all night long, man. And I got some friends that are calling me, hey, we got some dope, come over here. So I was like, man, I can go and kick back with the homies for a couple hours. But I didn't leave anywhere. I just stood there at that NBC Suites. And in that morning, I know that she was still upset. Now it's Sunday morning. I didn't sleep at all, man. I smoked all my cigarettes. I was tweaking out, I was high. And so I tell her over breakfast that Sunday morning, I said, hey, just don't be mad. I'll go to your church with you, just don't be mad at me today. We only got one day before I go to this program. And she looked at me. She's like, all right, you don't want to, you sure you want to go? Yeah, come on, that's cool. So we go to church and with no intention on getting saved. I had no intention, again, I actually was thinking like, okay, this program is going to help me stop doing all these other drugs, and I'll just kick back, drink beer and smoke weed all day and go to AA meetings or something, because I knew of some homeboys that were doing all that. Mm-hmm. And I'll just follow in their footsteps. Well, I didn't think that Jesus was going to have any role in this. And so I go into this church, just kind of looking around, not expecting anything. And the next thing you know, man, I hear the gospel message, and I start hearing this message of love and grace. And Nate, one of the biggest things that really captured my heart that Sunday morning, which was June 11th of 2000, was when I was thinking in my thoughts, hearing the gospel, like, okay, this is great, but God can't love a person like me, because I was thinking of all the things that I've done. I was like, man, I've done a lot of bad things. I hurt a lot of people, especially my family. I just hurt them emotionally, mentally, and even physically. And I said, God wouldn't love a person like me. He'd probably love a person like, someone else. He loves a person like you, Nate, not me. That's what I was thinking, And the moment that I had that thought in my brain, the pastor that was preaching says, it doesn't matter what you've done in life, how bad or good, God's love is greater than it all. The moment I had that thought, wow, that was the word that was spoken. God's love is greater than that. And it captured me so big. And, so I'm standing there and I'm like, sitting there and I'm thinking I want to cry, but I'm holding back these tears, man. And so the service is over. final prayer's done. I'm thinking, wow, that was close, man. I almost became a Christian or something, you know? Like I was holding back these tears. I was so emotional. And then, but it wasn't over. There was a final invitation like, hey, if these emotions, or if God is speaking to you and you know that God spoke to you, you need to come up here and ask God to forgive you of all your sins, because that's his love reaching out to you. And I was like, again, it was as if everyone in this little small sanctuary disappeared, and it was just me, Jesus, and this preacher, you know. And I just found myself at the foot, you know, there of that platform, of that altar, if you will, and just crying, just weeping. I never said a sinner's prayer at that moment, at that time. I didn't say a sinner's prayer. I just cried my eyes out. And the words I did say was, I'm sorry, God. I just kept on repeating, I'm sorry, God. I'm sorry, God. There was a whole song or two that was being played. And, you know, these men came over, they started praying for me. And they're like, oh, hey, man, you know, your name's Tommy, right? I'm like, yeah, how do you know me? You know, and man, we've been praying for you. You know, your wife's been asking us to pray for you as a men's group and everything. And so our prayers are being answered right now. And so, you know, it was very emotional. I started to meet these other guys, you know, and just see them. And they knew me because they were praying for me. And my son happened to be there at this moment. You know, he was about 9 or 10 years old at this time. And he, as a matter of fact, he had just turned 10 because it was in June. So he was looking up at me. And I remember I was just like, you know, I never really cried in front of my son. I always want to have, you know, I never really cried. You know, I just never did. And that's sad, you know, because crying is healthy. And it feels good, you know, when it's a good cry, you know, but I never cried. And so the first time in my life, I'm having this emotional tearing up moment, man. And it felt good. It felt cleansing. But still, I was like, oh, son, you don't look at me cry. Go over there with your mom. And, you know, I was expecting him to go, but he didn't, man. He stood right there. And he had been going to church with my wife, you know, for these past 4 years too. So he's really familiar with like children's ministry and prayer and, you know, God's love and all the, you know, gospel stories and everything, you know. So he looked up at me and he said, Dad, it's because God loves you. You know, those are the words he said. And I remember, man, that just, that moment right there too, it'll never disappear from my brain, you know. I remember I just wept even more, you know, uncontrollably almost. And I just picked him up and I started kissing him on the face. And as I'm crying, and I made a promise to him that I was gonna be his daddy, that I was never gonna leave him or his sisters or his mom, that I was gonna do everything I can just to always be there, never to leave again, like how I have. He's only known me in prison pretty much. You know, I think up until that point, I've only maybe attended 2 of his birthdays, you know, and one of them he doesn't even remember because he was like 1 year old, you know. And so I just made that promise to him, you know. And so, yeah, that was on June 11th of 2000. And so, you know, I just look back on all of that and that moment. But prior to that, all the things that led up to that, you know, some family members that just poured into me at times, and my wife and her prayer group and everything. It's just like, wow, the Lord had his hand in it all the time. And I don't know, what are your thoughts, man, in the sense of, I want you to tell me, because I think that when we look back, you know, we see God leading us, right? God leading us. Even when we don't know it. Does he do that? Like he leads us when we don't know it, right? Even when we're not saved.
Yeah. You know the truth of that. I mean, of course, you know, he was designing everything to get you to that ripe moment. He was ripening your heart, pursuing you, the hound of heaven, the Spirit of God chasing you down.
The hound of heaven, man. That's so good.
So I wanted to ask you a couple like follow-ups to that part of your story, because I mean, really that's part of your story, but you know, that was over 20 years ago, and God's been doing amazing things since that time. I like the way you described it to me last night. You're like, I didn't really understand people who weren't all in on Jesus once they got saved. You know, why wouldn't you want to be all about it, you know? But looking back, one of the things that I think is encouraging about your story is definitely Diana's commitment to you and her prayer life for you. We were talking yesterday and with Pastor Mike Casey and his wife Michelle, who are big pillars in our church here in Monterey, who have a similar story in that she even got to points where she was exasperated and ready to walk away from the marriage before he became a Christian. And she was encouraged to just keep sticking it out a little bit longer and to faithfully wait and pray. And she did. And, God heard those prayers. I think for people listening, there's like a couple of ways that you can kind of go with that. One is the encouragement of, we all have people in our lives that we care for immensely that aren't doing well.
Yeah.
And being like your wife and like so many others over the course of church history who have prayed hard for long periods of time for someone that they care about, trusting that God is going to do something in that person's life, believing for them even when they have no faith themselves. So I think, to me, it urges us in that direction. And, I think there's probably a lot of people in the church, especially these days, there's a lot of parents who have watched their children walk away from the Lord. And that's been really discouraging to them. But I find a lot of times parents will do like anything but pray.
Yeah.
They'll do anything but grab a few friends and say, hey, would you get together with me every week and cry out to God with me for my child or for our children? And let's ask God to do something. And let's just commit to that until the breakthrough occurs, because so often it's like, well, I'm going to send them an article, or I'm going to send them your Bible study, Pastor Nate, I'm going to, I want to send them this book, it's like, hey, they're probably not in the frame of mind where they're going to read, the book that you send them. Like, that's fine. You could do that. Maybe they will pick up A Reason for God by Keller or something. But if they're just out there doing their thing, there's a good chance that's not going to make it on their list of priorities.
Yeah.
But you can pray for someone. You don't have to ask for their permission. You can take them all the way to the throne room of God. But then I'm sure another way of taking it is there are people, of course, who, they prayed and they prayed and they prayed, and that breakthrough never happened, and so it can be a discouraging thing to them. And I'm sensitive to that too, because, as much as we love the happy ending, it doesn't always happen. So, what would you say as an encouragement to people that are listening, thinking about the way that your wife held the faith for you?
I think, when I share my story, and one of the things that I'm always reminded of to communicate to folks that I'm sharing with is never to give up, because I know those are easy like sayings or even a cliche, never give up, but and the reality is that we can't give up on what God can do. And just trusting in Him. And I try to like present, this testimony of what God has done in my life to encourage families, marriages, parents of children, because God can do the miraculous as long as we keep on trusting Him. And on that, when that happens or how that happens, and even if that happens, we don't know, but we know that as we're trusting the Lord, God will get them through that. And oftentimes God does answer those prayers on His timing, and again, I'm reminded of the just from the Gospel of Mark from chapter 5, what we were looking at yesterday is just that demoniac, that crazy man, and who would have ever thought that this person can be saved, and so we see that in the scriptures, but then when you see it being lived out in a person's life, it helps them to just really trust the Lord, and that it's also a tough thing though too, Nate. You brought something up but it may not happen, and that's the reality of life, and it is so hard to just watch a family and they pray and they're just seeking the Lord, and they really don't see any kind of breakthrough. And then, that life is ended or whether it ended tragically or whatever, and it's just like, I feel like, oh, wow, what do we say now? God, did He come through? And And for me, what I have noticed in those kinds of situations is that family that continued to seek the Lord, even though maybe the prayers were never answered the way that we all would like them to get answered, God met them in different ways and comforted them in amazing ways during that time where even their own personal walk, grew and they themselves have some kind of a testimony, even though those prayers weren't answered. And so there's still, even though maybe a loved one wasn't delivered or set free from a grip of addiction or a particular lifestyle or something, the testimony of God still meeting that family in a different way, is still powerful. And so I just try to encourage them, when you're seeking the Lord, you're not going to lose.
Yeah. It's still the better path.
Yeah.
Because, part of it is the way that you relate to the person that you're praying for.
Yeah.
Because if you don't take them to God in prayer and you're not pleading that the gospel breaks through into their hearts and lives, and you're not interceding for them in that way, the only alternative is a hardness is going to come over your heart, a hatred, and a feeling where you despise that person. That's going to come over you. It's going to be hard enough as you're believing God for them not to go in that direction, but at least you stand a chance, so God's sanctifying, growing. And there's so many stories that seem like they concluded without God answering that prayer, but there's also the unknown. We don't always know what those last moments, those dying breaths were like in someone's life. And maybe in that moment, God gave them clarity. And, a lot of times we have that hope.
That is so true. I have a family member through marriage. And this happened a few years back, and he and I, back in the days, man, we would get high together and do a bunch of things, and I get saved, and I remember having interaction with him from time to time, and just encouraging him, and hey man, you got to stop this, come to church, and he was like, man, I don't need no Jesus stuff, I can't believe you got suckered into that Jesus stuff and all. He would tell me, right, and again, this was a family member through marriage, and so I knew him pretty well. Well, he ends up getting sick with some cancer. I forget, it was stomach cancer or something like that. He had gotten really sick, and he was on his deathbed, And when he first got on that deathbed, he was still had the attitude like, I did it this long without Jesus, and it's why now, kind of like being very prideful. But a few weeks after that, and because I was going, pretty frequently, and a few weeks after that, I go and I just talked to him, and I said, hey, Manuel, it's just he and I. And I just asked him, I said, hey, can I pray with you? I didn't say nothing. I said, hey, can I pray with you? And he said, yeah. But then he had some questions for me before I prayed. And so it was questions about, just the reality of Jesus and God and kind of the experiences that I had. And I just started sharing with him, answering his questions. And again, the whole family had been praying for years, for Manuel. And, he starts crying. He starts crying right there in this bed. And my stepmom comes in and she's there. So she sees him and she starts crying and we're all crying. And I just asked him, like, hey, do you want to accept Jesus right now? And he said, yeah. And he said, I want to accept Jesus as my Savior. And I said, okay. I prayed with him. He prayed for him. He asked God to forgive him of all of his sins. And it was about a week later, he gave his last, he had his last breath and he died, but from all those years of praying, of interceding, and even having to go through like just him talking trash to us. What's wrong with you? You're believing a fairy tale and all this and that, to the point where I didn't want to talk to him no more, because he would just make me mad. It's like, man, I'm going to sock this dude, man. You know what I mean? He's coming at me sideways and all this, but just for all that faithfulness of just continuing to pray, and they're on his deathbed, him finally getting to the point of like, I need Jesus. I want Jesus to forgive me. And him actually saying those words, it gave so much comfort, even though there's so much turmoil that was taking place throughout those years prior, it almost like was erased, and that's what God does. I guess he just erases all that bad stuff and, the bad memories. And it's like, well, he asked for salvation and forgiveness. and a week later he died, and it's, praise the Lord, like, he may have died, but he's alive today,
Amen.
So it's just those things of just don't give up. The temptation to give up is always there.
Yeah.
And I think we just press through that. We press it because we never know what the Lord's going to do and how he's going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing that we can just say. And I think also too, I would encourage families, like when we pray and you're asking for prayer, you're going to church and you're being a part of a prayer group and you're interceding for a loved one, a child, a spouse, or something like that. What happens is I really think that the fellowship with the believers gets stronger. And you have a sense of like there's this family, there's family, and there's support, there's a sense of safety and faith. When your faith is weak, you know where to go, and so it's just like a win-win.
It's a shared burden that you have together with someone else. It's very vulnerable sharing with another Christian this personal hurt and broken relationship that you have in this other part of your life, and to ask them to pray with you. Yeah. That's a very vulnerable thing to do, but you're right. It creates that bond. It's all good, is the thing. And I think what we're saying is, if this is your situation, sometimes I'll hear people say like, well, I prayed for them, I've been praying for them, but I'm not, I don't want to critique someone's prayer life per se, but I would say, hey man, make sure you're really praying. Yeah. If you're just talking about like in a moment where you're angry, you're like, God, why don't you reach into their life? And that's it. That's something, but I think what we're talking about is a more robust dependence on God over a long period of time. All right. Another thing I want to ask you about related to your story, that I thought was interesting, just talking to you last night. You shared, and you alluded to it a little bit today, how the times that you were locked up, they had moments where they'd offer you, to learn a trade or to, better yourself, so to speak, while you're incarcerated. And I think some people do have a little bit of a Pollyannish kind of fantasy idea of what prison might be like. It's like, it's a great time for rehabilitation to take place, a second chance. These men and women can go in there and we're going to, offer education and training and services, and they can come out, and you made the decision the whole time, like, no, I'm not doing any of that.
No.
And so then you're sitting there at 29 going, man, I probably should have done some of that stuff, learn how to, you mentioned things like upholstery or woodworking, you're like, I probably should have done some of those things, but you didn't. And you're sitting there at 29 feeling badly about yourself because you're feeling like, I have no skills. Yeah. I have nothing to offer my young family. Yeah. And all of that. And so the thing I want to get you talking about right now is just the redeeming power of God and what he is able to do, because I definitely minister to plenty of people who, maybe not in as extreme of a way as you experience, but definitely at times in just as extreme of a way as you experience, feel like, man, I'm old. I mean, you were only 29, but feeling that way, like I'm old. I don't have skills. I'm just starting to walk with God, and I've made a mess of my life up to this point. What chance do I have to see something beautiful happen? And my encouragement is always like, man, the best days are yet to come. Yeah. Good stuff is around the corner if you continue to walk with him. But what was that like for you? And how would you encourage someone that's in that mentality? Yeah,
it was tough. It really was. It was tough because, I just, looking at that point in my life, pretty much all of my 20s were done with, and had no education, nothing, and just feeling just really down. Nothing to offer. And here I am as a Christian. I'm like, oh, what do I want to do? And for me personally, what would help me, and maybe this can help a lot of people too, and I really think it can, is that I was willing to not only work hard, but I was willing to yield. I was willing to yield to authority and to learn something, and because that was a big problem of mine. I didn't like authority, and just wanted to rebel, just because they were in authority. So I made a decision in my mind. It's like, you know what, if I show up and I'm willing to work hard and do whatever that boss says or what they say or what they recommend for me to do, I'm going to do it, And so I eventually got a job at a warehouse. Again, I didn't know how to drive a forklift. I didn't know anything, how to work a warehouse job even, but I was willing to learn and to work hard. And, but it took a lot of just yielding to authority. And I think that's one of the biggest things, man, is just for someone who who battles with that, in his or her life, however old they might be 29 or they might be 49 or 59, and they're looking at their past as like, man, I have nothing to show for it. And we can give up on that, what you said, man, is like the best days are ahead of us. Your past doesn't dictate, don't let the past dictate who you can be or what God wants to do in your life. I always try to tell people, like, let your past really be a stepping stone, for greater things and to reach ahead, forgetting those things which are behind, right? What Paul says, and press forward, and so that's why I try to encourage them. Like, let your past, in a sense, really be an inspiration of like, you know what? I'm not going to do that no more. I'm going to do something different. And to do something different really does require a lot of humility, a willingness to work hard and to be diligent, and to submit to authority and to go in a direction that will help you to really better your life, and just don't give up on that, just because of what your past may look like. We all have a past, some are a little brighter than others, but it's still a past.
That's good. That's a good word. And then also, I would love to ask you, besides the obviously crucial thing of if you have someone in your life that you're praying for, or that you really care about, and they're going the wrong way, besides the encouragement to be praying for them, what other encouragements might you give to someone? Especially, I'm thinking of those who have someone in their life who is an addict. And you mentioned the other day, like, hey, you got to help people that are, when you're doing like a drug and alcohol kind of recovery ministry, sometimes you don't get access to the person that's actually using. They're not ready for ministry at times, but their families and their friends, their spouses or their children or their parents, they need help in knowing how to navigate this person. What are some of those big time-tested lessons that you've learned that you've thought, I have to, because I'm sure it's just a repeated thing over and over again. Like, okay, you got to have a boundary. You got to, so what are some of the things that you share with people? Yeah.
So obviously you're right, those boundaries, but I would say for the people that are they find themselves in that place, I think we talked about it just a moment ago, was really the sincerity of prayer, and the power of it. Like, really learn to grow in the sincerity and understand and believe in the power of prayer, and having that prayer time, that moment with Jesus. Really be sincere about that. Grow in that. And in addition to that, I think the loved one already knows where you stand. Sometimes it's like, well, I talk to him about Jesus all the time and I'm doing all this. And I was like, well, they already know that. I think the biggest thing is living it out, is just living out the scriptures and living out your Christianity, within the home. That's always the hardest place to really live it out, is there in the home. And every situation is going to be different though, and this is one of the things I share with a lot of families that have their loved ones, and like, hey, what do we, do I just continue to love him and pour out grace? And it's different. Every circumstance is different. There's some circumstances I'll encourage the families, that I think that sounds like your best option is continue to love them with grace and, be there and listen and not enable, but, really be there and just continue to love. But then there's some circumstances I'm like, oh yeah, no, you got to set some hardcore boundaries right now, because this is destructive, not just for him or her, but also for, the family as a whole. You really have to lay down some tough love, so it's always going to be different, but overall, I would say it's just, even in both of those circumstances, whether it be this one where you really want to love them with grace, or you want to have this tough love, is the element of prayer, the sincerity of it, and living out your Christianity, to just really have it be genuine and authentic, and I think those are the best things, that I would encourage someone to do.
Yeah.
It's just really that.
That's good. So kind of wrapping things up a little bit today, I want to ask you about something that it doesn't have to really to do with anything that we've talked about up to this point, and really is kind of the thing I admire the most about you, as much as I've wanted you to tell your story while you've been here and all of that. To me, I admire you as a pastor, and since 2014, you've been pastoring Hope Alive Church in Santa Ana, and I'm just curious, like, what are your hopes for Santa Ana? What are your hopes for the church there? What are you kind of dreaming about a little bit and wanting to see the Lord do in that community?
Man, this is really cool. Cool question. Our dream, our overall dream, and I think it's kind of wrapped up in our mission statement, is love God, love His church, and love people. And so there in the city of Santa Ana, there's a large, heavily populated area, close to 350,000 people. And many of the residents there are immigrants. It's a very concentrated area. If you don't know where Santa Ana is, I know you know where it's at, but it's very concentrated, and with that, there's a lot of gang activity, a lot of drugs, homelessness, and all these things. And there's a lot of opportunity for just the hands and feet of Jesus to go out into the community. And this is something that, as far as like a dream and a desire and a vision the Lord's given to us and to me, is to be those hands and feet in the community, meeting needs, and whether it be through a meal, or through, just being there, helping out with clothing if we can, and just giving away free things when we have them. And we do it with a purpose of not just ministering to the family members, but also sharing the gospel and inviting them to church, inviting them to accept Christ, or to, offer them prayer. These are some of the things that we do. And one of the other highlights as far as vision is really connecting with our youth. And this is something that the youth of the city, this is something we have been doing for a long time already, just going out into apartment complexes and just different places and just ministering to youth. I always tell people, man, don't ever underestimate the power of pepperoni. We bring some pepperoni pizza, man. All the kids come out, but they're not just there for the pizza. Primarily, probably are, but we build up relationships, and building these relationships up with these young kids and these youngsters that I've been able to do for a while now. It's really cool because these relationships are continuing. Some of these students now, I call them students, but they're not students no more. They're like in their mid-20s. Some of them have families now, and like one of my barbers, he's a kid I know from 8th grade, and he's my barber now. And it's just really being embedded in our city, not just for the residents, but also having relationships with city council and the police department. And so very relational is our church. And I think this is one of the hopes and dreams and visions, that all these relationships continue to grow. And also with other church families, other church leaders that are in the city as well, just to connect and have some unity, because, we just want to see the city, man, just come to saving faith in Christ, So whatever it is that we can do, I always share, man, is like whatever it is that we can do in the city of Santa Ana, we're going to do it for the sake of the gospel, and if that's bringing some food, if that's bringing some pepperoni, whatever it is, man, we're going to do it. So that's the overall kind of vision. And I'm really excited because we started the church in 2014 there in Santa Ana, and we've been renting a local school to meet at on Sundays. And so we don't really have like an established place. We've been looking, and the Lord led us to a place right off of Bristol Street, one of the main corridors in Santa Ana there in Orange County. And it's right off of Bristol, man, right there. And so there's a building right there. We're leasing this building. It's an 8,000 square foot building for us to start off in. It'll fit us, and we can operate out of. And really excited, man, to be there. And one of the confirmations I really believe the Lord has us there is right after we signed the lease and got the lease done, and and everything. About 2 weeks later, a building right next door to us was leased out, and they put up a banner not too long ago, and it said, "Coming soon, Hustler Hollywood." And so, this particular part of Santa Ana where the church is at was at one point, there was a large, red light district, a lot of prostitution and all that stuff. And so I was like, wow. My wife says, "What is that?" I go, "Oh man, it's time." I go, "It's proof that we need to be here," And so, it's we're looking forward to what the Lord has these next coming years. So
that's amazing, man. I think that's just hearing you talk about it. That's what I love about and have loved about hearing about your ministry. It's like, obviously, there's tons of problems in Santa Ana. Yeah. There's all kinds of sin. There's destructive things going on. But your hope is alive, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's what you want. You're not just sitting back going, "Oh man, what's wrong with Santa Ana? All these problems that they have and these people that are ruining this city." Your feeling is the gospel is the only hope here. And so we're going to do whatever we can to bring it to this community. So
That's
I love it. So tell me, what's been one of the biggest surprises to you about being the pastor of a church?
Oh, man. That's like a trick question, bro. Honestly, as hard as it is, because it's not easy. It is hard. I'm not going to lie. It's like, it doesn't come easy. Just the richness of the relationships that I get to have, not just with like our leadership and everything, but just the young families that are coming to church, and just the love that, I get to have for them and they for us, and to see that, and to have a front row seat to a lot of just amazing things in the lives of people. And so through those relationships, being so close to them, and just seeing those wonderful things that God is doing in these young families, from them, from purchasing of houses to new kids, and I think just to be a part of lives like that, I never experienced that. It's been this past 7+ years that we have been, but it never gets old. I think that's one of the big surprises. It's just, man, it is so neat just to have these relationships and friendships within the body of Christ, and to see them grow, and just to love the Lord. So I would say that's one of the biggest things. I don't know if that's so much a surprise, but it was something that was really unexpected when we started the church. I didn't expect, I guess I didn't think about it, but just to have those relationships is awesome.
That's refreshing. So as we wrap it up, do you have any favorite book that you would recommend to people listening to the podcast?
Any favorite book? There's the first thing that comes to my mind is there's a book I'm reading right now, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a small book, and it is called Multi-Directional Leader. I don't know if you've seen it or anything like that.
I haven't read that one.
Yeah, a multi-directional leader, and I don't know who the author is.
Okay.
I forgot the name of the guy.
Well, we'll look it up and we'll
You
put
can
it
look
in the
it
show
up.
notes.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
And it's easy. What I like about it is an easy read right now. So yeah, it's a small little book. It ain't big at all, but I'm really enjoying the book. Yeah, it's really encouraging because I think for me, it's just the whole multi-directional. A lot of things that are going on in leadership's life. For me as far as being a church leader, so it's just how to function and how to navigate through all the different stuff.
Yep. A growing church, a lot happening.
Yeah.
Any last exhortations or encouragements for all of us?
I would say let's just pray and have a great expectation of 2022. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm looking forward to. I love you, Nate. I really do, man. I'm grateful for these past weekend to be with you, your wife, your church family. It's just it's really cool. I'm looking forward to just more of this.
Yeah,
That's
I
for
love
sure.
you too, man. I really appreciate you getting to know Diana better this weekend has been great. And I'm excited about the year to come for you. I can hear it in your voice, that there's new building and it's a venture of faith, all the trusting God, the stress that accompanies that. But he's got big shoulders. He's doing the work.
Amen.
He's brought you this far. He's got plans. And your identity isn't wrapped up in all that. Your identity is a child of God.
Amen.
The same identity that he gave to you on day 1, June 11th, 2000.
That's it. 2000.
2000.
Yeah.
That same identity he gave you that day, that's the same identity that'll get you through all the stuff that you're going to face in these
Praise
next
God.
years as a pastor. So appreciate you, man.
We pray that today's discussion has blessed you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share so we can continue to reach people and make Jesus famous in our lives and the lives around us. Until next time, God bless.